On June 13, 1985, a middle-aged CIA officer named Aldrich Ames walked out of the agency's headquarters in Langley, Virginia. He wasn't carrying a briefcase or a top-secret folder. Instead, he held a simple plastic shopping bag. Inside that bag was a list of names, the names of every single Soviet agent working for the United States. In one afternoon, Ames didn't just leak a secret. He signed the death warrants of the CIA's most valuable assets. This is the story of the most damaging traitor in American history. A man who sold out his country not for ideology, but for cold, hard cash. For nearly a decade, Aldrich Ames lived a double life, feeding the KGB the crown jewels of American intelligence while his own colleagues were being hunted down and executed. But how did a mediocre, alcoholic officer manage to blind the CIA for so long? And what finally led two determined women to uncover the truth hiding in plain sight? By the end of this video, you'll see how a $50,000 Jaguar and a simple chalk mark on a mailbox brought down a multi-million-dollar spy empire. In the early 1980s, Aldrich Ames was a man drowning in debt. He was a 31-year veteran of the CIA, but his career was stalling. He was struggling with alcoholism, a messy divorce, and a new wife, Rosario, who had a taste for the finer things in life. On a salary of just $60,000, Ames was desperate. In April 1985, he made a decision that would change history. He walked into the Soviet embassy in Washington, D.C. and offered to sell a small piece of information for $50,000. He thought he could play both sides, give the KGB a few low-level names, take the money, and walk away. But the KGB knew they had something much bigger than a one-time informant. They had a mole inside the heart of the CIA's Soviet division. But what happened next shocked everyone. Instead of staying quiet, Ames went all in. Just 2 months later, he handed over the big dump, a massive collection of documents that identified virtually every human source the CIA and FBI had inside the Soviet Union. Suddenly, the lights went out for American intelligence. One by one, their best spies began to vanish. Back at Langley, the atmosphere turned from confusion to pure terror. The CIA's most prized assets were being recalled to Moscow, only to be arrested and never heard from again. Among them was Adolf Tolkachev, known as the billion-dollar spy, who had saved the US billions in defense spending. Then there was General Dmitry Polyakov, a top-level GRU officer who had been a loyal American asset for decades. The CIA knew they had a leak, but they couldn't find it. They suspected their communications were compromised or that the Soviets had planted a bug in their headquarters. They never imagined the traitor was sitting right in their own office, carpooling to work with them every day. Why did this decision change everything? Because as long as the CIA looked for technical bugs, Ames was free to keep selling. He was now the KGB's most valuable asset, and they were paying him handsomely. Over the next few years, his bank account would swell by more than $4.6 million. But with that kind of money comes a problem. How do you spend it without getting caught? While the CIA was mourning its lost agents, Aldrich Ames was living like a king. He bought a $540,000 house in Arlington, Virginia, and paid for it entirely in cash. He traded his old car for a $50,000 Jaguar XJ6. He started wearing tailored suits and got expensive dental work to cap his teeth. His colleagues noticed the changes, but Ames had an excuse for everything. He claimed his wife, Rosario, came from a wealthy family in Colombia. Even when his monthly phone bills hit $6,000 and his credit card spending went through the roof, his supervisors looked the other way. They liked Rick. He was one of them. But while the leadership was blind, two women in a windowless office were starting to connect the dots. Sandy Grimes and Jean Vertefuel were part of a small task force assigned to find the mole. They didn't look for high-tech bugs. They looked at the money. Sandy noticed a chilling pattern. Every time Ames had a meeting with a Soviet official, a large cash deposit appeared in his bank account a few days later. What the government did next was unbelievable. They authorized a full-scale FBI surveillance operation that would last for 10 intense months. By 1993, the net was closing in. The FBI followed Ames everywhere. They went through his trash, tapped his phones, and even installed a camera near his house. On October 13, 1993, they caught the smoking gun. They watched as Ames walked up to a neighborhood mailbox and made a small, horizontal mark with a piece of chalk. This was the signal. It told his Russian handlers that he was ready for a dead-drop meeting in Bogota, Colombia. The FBI followed him to South America, watching as he met with his handlers in the shadows. They had everything they needed. They just had to wait for the right moment to strike before he could flee to Moscow. On the morning of February 21, 1994, Aldrich Ames pulled out of his driveway, likely thinking about his next big payday. But he didn't get far. FBI cars swarmed his vehicle, and agents pulled him from the driver's seat. His first words weren't a confession. They were a shout of defiance. "You're making a big mistake. You have the wrong man." But they didn't. Inside his house, investigators found bags of shredded documents and a computer filled with messages to the SVR, the successor to the KGB. The man who had traded the lives of his colleagues for a Jaguar was finally in handcuffs. Aldrich Ames was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. His betrayal led to the execution of at least 10 men and compromised hundreds of operations. He died behind bars in early 2026, a man who traded his soul for a lifestyle he could never truly enjoy. His story remains a haunting reminder that the greatest threats aren't always outside the walls sometimes. They're sitting in the desk right next to you. If you enjoyed this deep dive into the world of espionage, make sure to hit the like button and subscribe for more documentaries like this. What do you think was the biggest mistake the CIA made in the Ames case? Let us know in the comments below. Thanks for watching.